Do you prefer Benjamin or Ben?
Ben in person. Benjamin on the page.
What, in contracts? Benjamin?
No, it's just Percy's a wussy last name. I gotta have something big in front of it.
Common.
I like the branding already. You're fully on board with the character?
This is actually a tattoo. I'm not wearing a shirt right now.
Tell me about the pitch you gave DC. I assume you pitched them on taking over the character?
Yeah. And two things came together at the same time. One, Dan Didio read a novel of mine called The Dark Net, called me up and said he wanted to bring this into the DCU, just like pump it full of adrenaline, shake it up, dose it with whiskey and broken glass, and just supersize it.
Steroids? You also threw steroids in there?
Sure, yeah, some of that too. And so he wanted to bring the dark web into the DCU. And I was also, I knew, on the horizon going to be stepping away from Teen Titans and stepping away from Green Arrow. So the opportunity came up to take over Nightwing. Two things converged.
Tell me about the subject matter of this first arc, which is going to have implications across the entire DCU.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah. Let's say that in as dramatic a way as possible. Yeah, it will impact the entire DCU.
See, look at that voice. He should be a voice actor, too.
So, you know, we have a lot of things to be afraid of right now. And cybercrime is chief among them. I've always been interested in stories that channel cultural unease. And if you think about, like, you go back to Frankenstein in the way, it's really about the Industrial Revolution and the fear of man playing God, fear of science and technology. If you look at, like, Godzilla, it's all about post-atomic anxieties. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, it's all about the Red Scare and McCarthyism. In the same way, right now, like, you're afraid of your phone. And you're afraid of your computer, right? Every time.
The apps, you're afraid of the dark web.
They're watching. Cambridge Analytica is watching. Facebook is watching. And every time your computer makes that carpenter ant sound, you're wondering, like, has it already begun? You know, is an online avatar in my name being set up right now in Russia as, you know, this worm travels through my hard drive's guts? So what we're doing is we're preying upon our audience, right? We're taking something that they already fear and then dramatizing it in the world of the DCU.
And what's interesting, I think, if you tell people that story is coming to the DCU, they'd say, oh, that's going to be a Batman story.
Right.
But it actually makes perfect sense for Nightwing because Dick Grayson's been reborn in the last few years as a super spy.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense because it's in a much more grounded place in the DCU.
It makes sense for a few different reasons. I mean, one is that, you know, you always want to have a villain that challenges your hero in an interesting way. And if you think about Dick Grayson, he's not a Luddite, but I mean, he sticks to the acrobatics and his batons. Like, he isn't all whizzed out with gadgetry like other characters. Old school hero, right? So it makes it an interesting villain, somebody he can't punch, somebody he can't kick. And he also, if you think about all the teams he's been involved with, all the adventures, all the different connections he has throughout the DCU, including his work with Spiral, like, he is at the center of his own web. So if you're talking about the dark web, like, he's at the center of his own web of heroes. And if you think about, like, vulnerable data, he is a vault of vulnerable data. And this storyline, you've heard all about identity theft. You know, welcome to secret identity theft.
You know, you've carved out a nice place in the comics world working on these characters that are not up in space all the time. You know, not the Justice League. You know, Green Arrow, you did the most successful run on Green Arrow, I think, in like 20 years.
Let's just say of all time.
Let's just go all time. Forget everybody else. But you know, that's
I
a
was
fact.
channeling Mike
I
Grell.
believe that issue
Mike
sold
Grell.
almost 100,000 copies.
It did
for
well,
Rebirth,
and I was
right?
really grateful to be part of that whole Rebirth event. It was a great time to come on with the show as well, some of the fans checking out the series. But, you know, Mike Grell throughout, that was my North Star. I was thinking a lot about him and a lot about that O'Neill Adams run and trying to, you know, tip my hat to that legacy.
Do you think your skills and your experience and all the different nonfiction and fiction writing you've done, which is vast, do you think that helps you tackle these kind of characters, the Dick Graysons, the Oliver Queens of the world, even Damian Wayne, psychopath that he is?
Well, right. You know, what I always do is a deep dive into research. You know, I've been reading these characters my whole life, but what I do is, you know, I'll read all the back issues I can get my hands on, and I try to, you know, home in on, like, what do I think the best villains are? What do I think are the best strengths, the best sidekicks, the best storylines, the best artwork? And I'm just trying to process and synthesize that because I want to put my own unique mark on the run, but I also want to make it feel true to that character's canon. So I was really lucky with Green Arrow in part because Green Arrow is sort of on the sideline of the DCU, and he can kind of do his own thing without worrying about the ripple effect into too many different characters. Right. Teen Titans is a very different story because you've got these characters, all of whom are connected to other series.
Yeah,
some of them marquee
big
series.
Spiderweb across
so I
the
always
universe.
had to be thinking about what was going on in those other series. It's really a complicated chess game. Nightwing, for the first time, I feel like I've moved up the ladder, let's say, and I'm in a situation where this storyline is going to be impacting other storylines. So I feel like I'm, for the first time, sort of at the center of this nexus of storytelling that has this, maybe you could call it an oscillating effect, that you're going to see it impact Batman, you're going to see it impact Superman, you're going to see it spread its tentacles into other people's characters.
A question about the research and rereading runs that you've read before. Do you discover something new? Does it change your opinion of the stories when you go back and reread Longbow Hunters, for example, if you reread that for Green Arrow,
yeah.
or when you go back to the Adams and O'Neill run? Does it change your opinion? Do you see the characters in a different way now that you're writing them as opposed to being a fan?
Absolutely, and that applies to any genre though, right? Here I am, a fanboy for Indiana Jones, and I go back and watch it with my kids and see it in a much different light, or watch James Bond with my kids. In that case, I had to sit down with my son and be like,
Don't be
do
like
you
him.
know what misogyny is?
Don't be like him, kids.
So,
kind
yeah.
of be like him, but don't be like him.
Right. So in going back through all this Nightwing, going back through Teen Titans, going back to Green Arrow, I'm coming at it not just as a fan, but as a creator. So I'm coming at it from a craft standpoint now. And I'm looking for techniques. And I'm looking for things that I guess you could say I could pirate from the past and make my own.
Plundering the past.
Plundering the treasure of the past.
I just wanted to hear you say plundering with your voice. That's perfect. So your background is incredibly unique for comics, which is saying something because it's such a transient business with filmmakers and writers from other different fields. You were a teacher at university.
Yeah,
you
professor
wrote-
for 10 years.
Don't want to shortchange you on the titles.
No.
Sorry,
and then
Professor.
I hung up my corduroy jacket with the elbow patches.
And your pipe? That's when you were known as Benjamin. Yeah, call me Benjamin.
No, Benjamin. Thank you very much.
But you did that. You've written several novels. You're an essayist. You're probably the first official essayist we've ever had on Behind the Panel. Yes, first time. And you've also written screenplays.
Let's not forget the erotic haiku.
We're keeping this clean, Ben. We're keeping this clean. How does that background and all the different types of writing skills that you picked up along the way help you write comics?
Oh, well, every single medium I jump into teaches me how to become a better essayist, a better comics writer, a better screenwriter, a better novelist, a better writer of erotic haiku, right? What I'm always doing is...
Now I believe you actually wrote that, by the way.
So in the case of comics, Terrence Hayes, he's a poet. He says that if you look at the difference between free verse and you look at the difference between free verse and form poetry, like a villanelle or a sonnet, like it's the difference between break dancing and break dancing in a straitjacket. He says it's badass if you can break dance. It's truly amazing if you can break dance in a straitjacket. Comics are constrained, right? You have 20 pages. You have 5 to 7 scenes. You have an A plot, a B plot, a C plot, a D plot. Right, the B plot becomes the A plot of the next issue. Every scene has to end with a question mark. You need a splash page on page 4, probably a splash page at the end to create your cliffhanger. There's a story math at work. You don't recognize these things when you're writing, say, a novel because you just have so much real estate in front of you. But when you're constrained like that, it makes you such a more efficient storyteller. You know, for instance, as a novelist, you're supposed to be characterizing, pushing forward the plot, contributing to theme all at the same time, but you have to do that when you're writing a comic because there's only so much space.
I've never heard the art of comic book writing described like that, which means you're definitely going back to college and teaching this to some group of students, aren't you? Come on, you gotta do it now.
Not yet.
No, seriously,
Professor
that's
of
a
Nerd
great
Studies.
But that is a great way to approach it. You're right, because there is natural constrainment in place because of the nature of the medium.
And actually, sometimes when I'll teach at a creative writing conference or something, and I'm looking at this novel manuscript, I'll be like, let's panel this. And it's like, panel 1, 2 dudes sitting at a table. And then we go forward, and it's like page 3, panel 8. 2 dudes are still sitting at a table, right? And they figure out how little is actually happening. Even if there's all this emotional depth and all these pretty sentences, it's like, use comics as a model here. You got to get things cracking.
So you mentioned that you've written several screenplays. The argument about why Nightwing should be the next DC movie produced, because to me that's a no-brainer. It'll cost less than a big Justice League International movie or anything like that.
Yep.
And he's got built-in name recognition, the original Robin. You can throw in a few cameos. I mean, come on. a Grayson movie. It's got to happen.
Yeah, you said it. You said it right there. I agree with you. And
There you go. Screenwriter. He's written it.
I'll star in it too. I'm available. I'll shave my beard. I'll get better glutes. I
Are you
promise.
going with nunchucks?
I'll jump into the dojo and work on that.
Okay, great. Let's go back in time to when young Ben Percy's just a comic fan, and tell me the comic books that turned you onto the form and made you a big nerd.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in rural Oregon, and it was so rural that we didn't have a grocery store. It was a mercantile. And my mom used to say, sit, and she would grocery shop at the mercantile over these, wooden boards rattling her cart. And I would sit at the end of the row with a spinner rack above me, and I would read comics, pull them down and read them. And if I was good, I got to take one home. I still have a lot of those ragged copies from back in the day. Those, tattered, stained copies. So, I was reading everything from Batman to X-Men to Man-Thing to Warlord. Warlord to this day, that's the DC character that I would most love to bring back.
Warlord.
That sword and sorcery goodness. So, I don't remember a novel I read, even though I was always a reader. I don't remember a novel until 4th grade, and that was The Hobbit. But I remember comics.
That was the first one you remember reading?
Comics I remember from the very beginning, from the time I was 3. So really, all my formative reading experiences, they come out of DC and Marvel. So it's a childhood dream come true to be working with these characters right now, to be a custodian of these characters.
A custodian. Well put. 3 comics that are on Ben Percy's pull list.
Oh, well, I'm reading Batman like everybody else, and loving what Tom King is doing when it comes to humanizing the character. I especially love that Super Friends, those Super Friends issues. I'm also reading Saga, and I just love the sci-fi bizarro-ness of it all. And I really dig what Sean Gordon Murphy is doing with White Knight. That guy, he's the double threat. He can draw like hell and write. I think he has a promising future.